Welcome to another episode of Show Me Your RAID Log, where we talk with industry leaders about how they use RAID logs and similar tools to help project managers succeed. I'm Kim Essendrup, co-host of the Project Management Happy Hour podcast and one of the founders of RAIDlog.com. I've used RAID logs for years to save broken projects and to keep my own projects from having to get saved. And I'm really excited to see how other leaders like to use theirs. And with me today to talk about RAID logs is Russ Parker. Russ is a retired Marine Corps officer turned project manager with a mission to help the next generation of project managers lead with confidence. He's a certified PMP, PMI ACP, and PMI RMP. He's also an authorized training partner with PMI and instructor. Through his company, 44 Risk PM LLC, Russ teaches, coaches, and mentors new and aspiring project and risk managers to grow as professionals and as leaders. So, Russ, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me.
We're really excited to have you on today. But before we dive in to talking about RAID logs, can you share a little bit about your background and what brought you to a place where you are working with project managers and your stakeholders on risk so much?
Yeah, so for me, it really goes, the story I like to tell people is that it goes back to my wife. My wife, she decided she wanted to get a PMP. I had no idea what the PMP was at the time. So she started studying. I obviously, as the good husband, was helping her and quizzing her and going through the flashcards. And I was, at this time I've been in the Marine Corps for 13, 14 years. And I'm going through these cards and I'm just like, hey, this stuff makes this sounds like similar to what I do. And I didn't really think about it at the time. She ended up getting her PMP and she was doing some project management. I was doing my Marine Corps thing, planning. And was in the States, I was overseas a couple times. And it came down to getting out of the military and start reflecting on my past. And, and realized all this planning. So I decided to give a CSM course a try, by recommendation of a friend, and everything just started clicking. And I was like, okay, maybe I can do this PMP. So I did the PMP. While doing the PMP, that's when I realized how close risk management is to how risk management is ran in the Marine Corps.
Hmm.
In actually the Department of Defense as a whole, if you really think about it. The Marine Corps, we have a Marine Corps order on risk management. The Joint Forces has a joint order on risk management. And it is so close to kind of like how we teach and look at risk management as project managers. Um, risk matrices, probability impact, just keeping a risk log type stuff. It's all similar and relates all the way back to when I was a lieutenant. The story I like to tell people is that I did not do risk planning at all. I was a lieutenant. I was busy. I was prep. I was doing more than I was probably supposed to at the time, and I skipped risk management. I copied someone else's their order, we called it, their planning document. I copied it, did a control F, took their name out, put my name in, submitted it up operations, didn't think anything of it. Ends up they did theirs in the summer. What I was doing was in the winter, and you know, therefore my entire plan was kind of off because it was definitely colder than the heat. And so even though I had done the actions by making sure, we had warm food coming out, we had, heating capability so that way if it got too cold, people can kind of warm up. And I did all the mitigation type events, but my order still said make sure you're bringing water and you're doing all these other things for heat. So anyone who read it would be like, eh. And I got called into my boss's office, who's a lieutenant colonel, and definitely, I will keep this PG, what was said to me. And I was, and that's where I learned about, what I say with 44 risk PM is proactive over reactive. He he was the first one that really said that to me. and it just kind of went with me with my career, and that's how I got really into risk. It's a long explanation how I got the risk.
That's a hard way to get into it.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah, it really seems like risk management in the Marines stakes are pretty high.
yeah, and that's why I think it's, we have so many different areas because one, we're doing a lot of risky training. Everything we do has, we have to plan against it. And I mean, leaving the combat side out of it, just the training to prepare to combat is risky.
Mm.
We're live fire weapons. If you know anything about the Marine Corps, we do a thing called combined arms, where, you're shooting artillery while people are moving underneath, well, not underneath it, you got to deconflict and do all these different area things. But, the whole thing is we put people through a complex, we hit them with artillery, we move closer. We hit them with mortars, we move closer. And then now we're on top of them. And we never gave them an opportunity to get up. Well, to do that and to practice that, that's risky. And you have to make sure that everyone knows their roles. You know, I mean, you want to talk about a register, like that thing's full of like all the things that can go wrong. Now it's pretty standardized for those type of operations, but depending on where you go, I mean, you have to still plan accordingly. And yeah, it really does correlate in more ways than I think people think.
Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to talking with you a little bit about raid logs because someone who, with your background, has a very, I guess, strong perspective on the importance of risk management.
And it's definitely important to have.
All right. Well, I guess my first question is how did you first learn about raid logs as a tool?
Uh, like the platform or just in general.
Just general raid logs. Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I said, going back in the military, we don't call them raid logs. We just I don't even know what we called them anymore. Now that I think about it, it's just a list of risks. But I mean, like I said, we did the whole probability impact. You had to do your response planning. You had to assess it, and what was your mitigation code. We had all these codes that we had to do, and so it was something I've been doing, like I said, for now 15, 16 years. And then when I got into project management, watching it, and I was like, oh, okay, like this is a concept that easily translated for me, which was nice. And but then seeing how people don't use it time. But yeah, getting into it is just, it's just something that just naturally, I think, occurred over the course of my career in the military.
All right. Well, can you share a time when using a raid log helped save a project or maybe help keep you from having to save a project?
Yeah, so a good opportunity for me there was actually overseas, and I was in charge of a lot of sustainment planning. And, so I was working in Afghanistan, I was in Kabul, and I was planning across really the country, working with special operations. And our general was like, hey, we're doing certain things, we're doing giving his guidance. And I was a captain at the time, and I was like, okay, doing my planning on contingency and making sure that, we are able to stay, really adaptable to what was going on. And I, developed my own little, I would call it a risk register now. I mean, it was not as intensive as probably what you'd use on a project, but I was like, it was really just a brainstorm of things that could go bad because that was my job as a logistics officer. So half the thing about logistics is what could go bad? Like what do I need to make sure I'm planning for? And while I was driving around base, I would like see things and I'm like, okay, like they have a ton of generators. If I need generators, they're probably going to be people I need to know. And I made a list of like, okay, and these are people I got to know. Well, there was an attack on one of our bases in a chow hall or food facility caved in on itself, they lost power. And because I kept this information on all these different people and resources, within 12 hours, I was able to have generators, an expeditionary field kitchen set, and a bunch of equipment on helicopters being, flown into the base. So that way they can get everything, they got the base back up and running in less than 24 hours after this massive attack. And, just to me, it's always been a point of the success that you can have when you just sit down and just think, what could go wrong? Obviously what can go right. Preach that all the time with people. Um, Not something I was thinking about at that time, but it's definitely like what could go wrong. And you may think it's insignificant, but the whole point is it's a risk. It might happen. And you don't want it to happen, but what if it does? What is your plan? Like, and that's what I try to, work with people and try to explain to them in this space is that this whole thing about a raids log is not about, you know, being pessimistic or optimistic or all these different things. It's just about what could go wrong and plan against it. It's a day long event, really, if you think about it, and then you just maintain it afterwards.
That is, I think, the most succinct definition of a raid log I've heard and it's so important because it's just you can get so there are a lot of sophisticated tools and methods we can call on as project managers, and it can be easy to get lost in those sometimes. But as you say, at the core of it is what can go wrong, and how are we going to try to keep that from happening?
hmm And then if it happens, who's responsible? And I think because let's say Murphy's out there. Like things are going to go wrong or things are going to go right. And it's you're better to have a plan and someone responsible to take care of it. It's just, you know, it, yeah, it just makes sense in my head, I guess.
It does. So when we talk specifically about a RAID log as a tool, as a spreadsheet, or however you're using it, what has been for you maybe the biggest pain point when using a RAID log as a tool specifically?
For me, it's just the standardization behind it.
Mm.
So again, in the military, one of the nice things is we have those Marine Corps orders that they give you this is how you're going to do it. Not yeah, if you think about it, maybe you can do it. No, like you're going to do this. So no matter where you went in the Marine Corps, so if I went from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina to 29 Palms, California, I knew what I can look at their raids, I can look at their orders, I can look at their planning documents, and I can quickly get spun up on what they're doing because it was standardized across the board. So I think the pain is that the raid log that you're using is not the same one that I use
Mm.
because the organization is just like, hey, make sure you're managing risks. Or if they even do have a PMO that's like, hey, this is our raids, still it's not enforced and people just make up their own stuff anyways.
So lack of consistency and standardization in organizations is what you see
Correct.
as a big problem. Yeah, that
Yeah.
can be challenging.
So you just different people use different things, which is fine. But I think within an organization, you want to establish some type of policy because, again, the whole proverbial if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and someone takes over my project, if I have this super complex thing that he doesn't know what they're looking, he or she doesn't know what they're looking at, then we're gonna, then what was the purpose of even really maintaining it in the long run?
Well said. So let's flip that around now and say, do you have a favorite tip or trick when using a RAID log that you might want to share with our watchers today?
Favorite tip.
Yeah.
I would say, and I don't know how you do it. Someone actually mentioned this to me, and I started using it, and I thought this was actually after I became a project manager, is that when you obviously on a raise long, risks and the issues are separate. Now depending on where you're at, sometimes they're on the same tab, whatever. But when you have them separate like that and you have a risk that turns into an issue, keep it on that tab. It's something I
Mhm.
learned and I really like. And you would think like, why wouldn't you move it to the issues? To me, is because when you do your lessons learned, you can easily identify the risks that you had turn into issues, vice the things that you missed that just showed up as issues. Is something that is a best practice someone taught me, and I thought that that was a phenomenal idea. So, it definitely helps you differentiate between the two.
And I suppose, would that give you perspective on whether or not your risk response strategy worked because you have that documented there?
It does. Like I said, that's one part because you get to see that there. But like I said, if an issue popped up, like it was that, therefore it's like it was an unknown unknown, or we just missed that one. So it kind of helps you in that lessons learned of, hey, in the future, you need to think about fraud and their capabilities to do X, Y, or Z because we didn't think about that because we had never dealt with this situation with fraud before. So yeah, like I said, I like that practice, and I think if I had to say there's one thing I like these days is doing that.
Really, really good advice. Now, today, the technology all project managers are talking about or thinking about at one point or another is artificial intelligence. And I would love to get your perspective on how you think artificial intelligence may impact or maybe already is impacting project management, particularly around risk and rate management.
Well, I think I mean you and I were kind of talking about before is this the capability of loading all your lessons learned into it and then being able to quickly search for information, which was, like I was saying in the Marine Corps, we had the Marine Corps Center for Lessons Learned. Um, I've been on the Marine Corps now for how long now? What year are we in? Yeah, 2 years. Hasn't been that long, but it just gets mixed up there. But in the Marine Corps Center for Lessons Learned, I'd hope they're doing the same thing, loading this up into I would think like some server to where people can easily search for information, like the search program I had to use through keywords and elements like that. But yeah, I think it definitely gives you a more search capability and can help you with those recommendations on moving forward type deal. So I think it's really going to be helpful, but it goes back to lessons learned and organizations actually implementing it. So that is going to be the hard part.
Yeah, I suppose if you don't capture the lessons learned, no AI can bring those to you. So,
Exactly.
wow. All right. Well, Russell, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your project management experience. And if our audience wants to find out more about some of the cool things that you're doing, like I understand you do risk management training, you do PMP training, you do all kinds of great things, and you've got a great blog. How can our viewers find out more about those classes and all the other things you're doing?
Yeah, you just have to go to 44riskpm.com. That's the number 44 riskpm.com. There, you can get access to my blog, my calendar. You can sign up for my email list. And I recently just started my own little learning management system, LMS, 44 PM Training Academy. So I have one course over there on risk workshops. And, you know, so it's my first one, don't judge. But so yeah, so kind of putting things together over here.
Outstanding. Well, I highly recommend you go reach out to Russ, check out what he's doing. Really great stuff around risk management. So, Russ, thank you so much for taking time to join us today and showing us your raid log.
Hey, I appreciate it.
For our audience, if you'd like to step up your project management game, you can check out our new RAID log application at raidlog.com. We're bringing the tried and true RAID log into the 21st century with the only platform dedicated to giving PMs the tools that they need to succeed in project delivery, starting with the RAID log. Come check it out at raidlog.com.